Welcome, Akanksha. Welcome,
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Good
Thank
to
you,
see
Mohit, for
you.
having me for such an exciting and interesting webinar.
It's my pleasure, Akanksha. We've got stalwarts like you to come here and speak to us about tigers, ecotourism, and communities. So it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I'm just trying to see how many people are already here, and I can start welcoming them. Okay, so I think there's a. Let me just check what's the update. Okay, Priya is here. Salil is here. Good evening. How are you, Priya? All okay? Salil, welcome. People are joining in, and it's nice to see. Harpreet, good to see you. Good to see you, Harpreet. We have friends here. Fareed is here. Very nice. Arif is also here. So we can see that there are many people who are interested. Yeah, if you'd like to introduce yourself, you can put it in the chat, and we know exactly who you are. Hello, Mike. Hey, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. And meet Akanksha. She's the one who is from Calcutta originally, lives in Gurgaon, and runs these beautiful places in Gorumara, in North Bengal, Sundarbans in West Bengal near Calcutta, and also a lovely resort in Pench. It's a lovely place. Anyway, so let me update the list now, and we have plenty of people here. Good. We've got Ravi, we've got Lalit, we've got Rohan, Shamal, Sanjay, many other people. Great. So friends, the intent of this, the intention to be here today is to clarify some concepts of ecotourism. UNWTO has declared that this is the year for rural tourism. And it sort of goes in line with what is happening post-COVID. People want to travel to places which are less affected or are more secluded, more isolated places. So rural tourism will benefit from here. Now, there are many rules and regulations, not rules and regulations by the government, but there are norms set by Global Sustainable Tourism Council, by UNWTO, which are optional, which people can choose to live by. And the idea is to let people know, the tourism owners and the tourists know how they should look at ecotourism. So a lot of my challenge has been that ever since I graduated from GSTC as a certified trained person from in sustainable tourism, I started to look at things differently in India. So I started to come across many ecotourism outfits. Either they were tour operators, or they were hotel people, or they were destination managers, so to speak. But the knowledge of ecotourism is largely absent. I won't say it's poor, but it's absent. And anything which is, for example, if they say, okay, I don't use plastic straw, fantastic thing to do. I don't use plastics, that's fine. But that's not the only thing that leads to ecotourism. There's a lot more in there, which I want to share with you. Okay, so let me start with introducing myself. I am Mohit Agarwal. I'm blessed with 4 children, a son and a daughter, and 2 non-humans. One is a Labrador, and one is an escapee African grey. I'm the follower of Shiva. Professionally, I'm an experiential ecotourism specialist with deep love for nature. I help people travel to some wonderful places in Asia. I'm on the board of Asian Ecotourism Network, and I've been trained and certified by GSTC in sustainable tourism. I'm the founder of Asian Adventures, a 26-year-old travel outfit. It's the largest and #1 bird watching tour company in India. I'm also the founder of Natty Netter, an email marketing company. This company is on a large mission to help Asian elephants with their corridors, free the Himalayas of plastic waste, help small wildlife NGOs, and conserve the ancient shrines, Himalayan shrines. So that was about me. Let me introduce Akanksha as well. So Akanksha Garg is the founder, director of Waxpol Hotels and Resorts. She's an avid traveler, conservationist, and a wildlife enthusiast. She's in the governing council of Responsible Tourism Society of India, CII Eastern India, and the Responsible Tourism Committee of Adventure Tour Operator Association of India. As a successful hotelier, she has been part of many initiatives ranging from policy making by tourism departments at regional and national levels. Her resorts are in Sundarbans, Dwars, and Pench. One of our most innovative and sustainable projects is Sundarbans Tiger Camp, which opened in 2004 and played a pivotal role in developing sustainable tourism model. So this resort has been shaping lives since its inception. So this was Akanksha's introduction. I want to know if everybody can hear me well. Is my are the acoustics okay? So if they are, then can you just say yes in the chat? Okay. So let me tell you, this webinar is for an hour. We will wind up by 8:30. And when you're leaving, we will, Akanksha will also give you some discount coupons for our places, and I'll be able to share one document which will be useful for you. It's not a selling pitch. This is to tell you about ecotourism, and Akanksha will tell you what she's doing about it. If there's a glitch in the system and internet goes off, don't leave, because I will reboot it in 1 minute and I'll be back. That's how the system works. Sometimes, it's technology. I have no control over it directly. Okay, so let me start with the slideshow here, and let me start with my own presentation first to tell you what I'm doing with ecotourism, and then I'll have Akanksha talk to you. Okay, can everybody see the first slide? Is it visible? This green, orange, red, and black. Okay, great, thanks. So, we're looking at changing trends, and we're looking at tigers and ecotourism. Tigers, for the simple reason that this is the flagship species of India, and anything which gets established for the tiger, it can be replicated for any other species or any other habitat, and it can be modified, tweaked, and used. So this #1 point, which says tourism, what happens is that with these national parks coming up, a lot of tourism started to happen, and that sort of rattled the originality of the local people. They were displaced, or they were asked to leave the parks at that point of time. That was the need of the hour. We wanted to save the jungles. We wanted to save the tiger. And then tourism sort of came in as a support method. But then it went out of proportion, because it's business. It's a double-edged sword, which everybody says it is, and it is. And then, so what does tourism do? It brings in infrastructure, it brings in opportunities, development, and it changes local dynamics. So it's got ups and downs both. Then what happens is that when you're looking at tourism, where we completely go wrong at times, or we've gone wrong at times, is that tourism never or failed to address communities at the first go. Because the whole thing was not being inclusive. It was just about being the species and the forest. It wasn't about the people. And which is why we've got examples like Corbett Park or a lot of other places which are now turning into wedding destinations, because there was no think tank that was talking about communities. So the rural communities have to gain and they have to be aligned, because we've already displaced them from where they were. And now we're expecting them to do their own thing. Won't happen. So what happens is that there's a complete alienation in the entire thing. And the entire ethos of wildlife tourism got lost. When that gets lost, the hotels start to struggle. And then they start to do weddings and other things and parties just to sustain themselves, because there's a lot of money that has gone in. The banks are asking for their money back. So, but if you include communities right from day one, then your business models completely change and they become more wildlife centric, they become people centric, and it's a inclusive, it's a holistic methodology that sort of starts to come up. I'm not saying that you can't go back. You can take a U-turn and go back and you can amend things. Anything of this sort can be amended because it's man-made and it can go back. But what can't be undone is a tree cover or the habitat loss, and you can just make do with what you've got. Then from communities, for example, if you need to build capacity, you need to talk about retaining social and cultural values, ancient values which they came up with, and put them on fast track if you like. No problem with that. But make them see the reason to stick to their original values. It's a win-win situation for them, because they'll be able to make money and also continue to use their traditional values. Then they aid conservation because they've been living with wildlife. Employment, entrepreneurship, futuristic approach, all these things have to be brought in when you have tourism coming in. And that's how you step up to eco-tourists. Now, this particular bit I'm going to talk about in my presentation later is the most important part. They're the ones who get the experiences, for whom we're creating these experiences, and they're the ones who give the money back into the system to the communities and to the tourism people to pay their bank loans and investments. Then if that happens, then you've got conservation happening at different stages. You got saving, you got to save the habitat, species, sustainable management practices, natural resources, aiding research, helping communities, and ecotourism back. Conservation will give everything back to you. It won't keep anything with it. Conservation is very forgiving when it comes to giving you back, provided you need to do what you're supposed to do, right? So this is my take on ecotourism. Let me come to, oh, that's a lovely tiger. That's probably from, I can't remember where. It's not my photo, but it's lovely. Anyway, so what is ecotourism? Ecotourism is sustainable tourism in natural areas. So if it's sustainable tourism in Shimla, in the middle of something, it's not ecotourism. It's sustainable tourism. Maybe you can have sustainable tourism. So ecotourism is often confused with sustainable tourism. Non-sustainable tourism to natural areas is also marketed as ecotourism. So sustainable tourism meets the needs of the present tourists and host regions while protecting and enhancing opportunity for the future. So it's got 4 pillars, and these 4 pillars I will talk about as we go along. So you can see the potters here. So UNWTO's statement on rural communities, tourism, many benefits must be felt outside of urban areas for the sector to fulfill its potential to provide opportunities for all. It's often the lifeline of rural communities, providing jobs and entrepreneurships, protecting natural and cultural heritage. So that's what the UNWTA is talking about. And then, of course, there are many other facets to it. If you like, you can take a screenshot of it and go through it in detail as you go along. In half an hour, I'm not going to cover everything about ecotourism. It's a very deep-rooted science. It's a very deep-rooted subject. You must understand that it's not just a title that you add to your outfit. So there are some of the shots. So 4 aspects of ecotourism are, let me just bring this here. So 4 aspects of ecotourism: sustainable management, which means that somebody has to manage this sustainably. Socio-economic impacts, and cultural impacts and environment impact. These are the 4 pillars on which ecotourism rests. Very important to know this. You know, how you want to look at the rural communities is important. How can tourism help? Creation and promotion of eco-lodges. Eco-lodges, you know, well, it's appalling, but India is one country where there should be many eco-lodges, but the concept does not exist. There are only a handful of eco-lodges in India. The true eco-lodges that would say eco-lodges. A lot of these places which we call eco-lodges are not eco-lodges, but that's fine. You can always make amends, you can tweak, you can put the systems together. It's a different science altogether. So it says creation and promotion of eco-lodges which adhere to the aspects of ecotourism and provide employment to locals. Why just employment? It's also entrepreneurship. That's how it works. It's about inclusivity, creating and encouraging responsible ecotourists. Who are ecotourists? I will talk about that. Empowering local communities to become stakeholders in the tourism industry. So the divide is so large that to empower local communities to become stakeholders in the tourism industry is something which is not going very well, you know, with the Indian business community. And it's beginning to happen now in the last few years. So I'm happy to see that, you know, more and more people are becoming inclusive. This is how we got to go. Capacity building, teaching or improving useful skills so that improve local income, and also learning from them. They are bigger teachers than who we are. Showcasing and preserving culture and history through various means, decorating with local artwork and all of that, you know. So there are many capacity building workshops that take place at different levels. The managers do it, the hotel people do it, the NGOs do it, and it continues to happen. And also what we do is we ask the local people to train us how they want us to be. And that's very important. So we just miss that part out because we think, you know, a lot of people who want to invest money think they're money investors, so they have an upper hand. I want to change that. I want you to look at the reason behind it, that for your project to be surviving, your project to experience success, you need to be able to do a two-way communication where tourism will happen, people will happen, and wildlife will happen. So who's a responsible ecotourist? This is the main peg in the entire game. This is the fulcrum. This is where everything rests. They're experienced travelers, and there are different categories, there are different terminologies. I won't go into that now, but I will come back to that at some other point of time later. There are 7 different categories, and there are researchers who've been talking about ecotourists, not ecotourism only. So ecotourists are your best emissaries. They're the ones who give you the money. These are the same people who either are forced or who have the love for nature at different levels. They go into these places and they start to build the reputation of that place step by step. And the responsibility, the dharma of a lodge, eco lodge, or an eco tour operator is to find such people or convert tourists into eco tourists and make them do it. And because the communities will benefit directly from them. So there will be social media writers, or there will be bloggers, the experienced travelers, and they will go back. So today, after COVID, we're not talking about one-offs. We're talking about setting up life cycles of these ecotourists. If I want to talk about sustainability, I want to talk about my people who come and experience things with me, and then they live with me forever, and even their generations. So if you've got your sales engine all mapped up, and delivering that, then you got win-win situation. And the communities will benefit and the wildlife will benefit as well. So they're eager to support local conservation. They're inclusive, they care about communities, they want to know about architecture, history, associated fields, and they're keen on varied experiences. Could you just put in the chat if I'm making any sense, or you think it's, or I'm not, or it's too overwhelming? If it's going all okay, just say yes. Just say type Y. Okay. So Harpreet says why, Shamil says why, Priya Susan says why. So understanding the role of an ecotourist by an eco lodge or an operator is the key thing, because as time will go by and we'll get onto digital platforms, the communities have to benefit from that for them to be able to aid conservation. You know, there's different kinds of food and different thalis. And this was very recent in Gir. You can see the Siddhi tribe at the back and their children here. They all look Siddhis to me. And you can see there's a local guide who's helping a tourist. Obviously, he doesn't look like a very serious bird watcher, but you know, he's helping him see the birds and appreciate nature, and that's a big thing. And then, you know, and then there's father and son duo who are on bikes, and they are bicycles, and they're exploring, and they might just sit down and have chai with the locals, or buy some toffees and, you know, distribute or share, you know, something with them, and look at the tourists with the villagers and this man with the hookah. Some interesting experiences, you know. So here is the question: are these the museum pieces that we use in our lodges, or are we saying that we are very big and we want to provide them employment? I think the way we treat this entire mechanism of tribal dance should be relooked at. And it's such a beautiful thing to do. And they are the ones who will display their art form for your tourist. And how do we respect and take that forward for them with a lot of love and care? That's something that shouldn't be muted. This is not, I've been looking at it, and I've been sort of, you know, at times my heart goes out to them. Shreya. So what's an eco lodge? I am going to go here. So it's an eco lodge is located in or near a natural area, adopts systems that protect environment, employs experts who are either trained in biology or have significant local knowledge. It adds value to visitors and help them become ecotourists. So from tourist to ecotourist, because then you can do a life cycle with them. Then you're never going to lose them. But if you say they're just tourists and you can't do anything about it, you know, the chances are that you'll continue to have to find more and more such people to come to you. That's all. So it helps train, build capacity, employ. So it's like church. It's like a temple where people will go. It's a consecrated space. They will energize themselves, learn more to teach more. That's how it will be. So if these are consecrated spaces, they will work. Eco lodges are like that. They should work for your 5 senses with your 5 elements. That's how you need to look at them. Encourages fair trade practices, contribute to local economy, demonstrate ecotourism in more sustainable long-term way to earn income than destroying and altering habits for short-term gains. So there's one place that is in Bandhavgarh called Monsoon Forest. This is in Gir. That's Lumpila. She's from Nagaland, and she's our manager at Gir. Who, yeah, she is on the tractor here. You know, sustainable destination management. So we're talking about, this is the biggest gray area of ecotourism in India. When I'm talking about destination management, I am talking about a region or a panchayat or a community that needs to have a destination manager. That's because it's got some sort of uniformity in terms of culture, social values, environment, you know, all of that, and it needs to be put together. For example, if I have a lodge somewhere and it's an eco lodge, and somebody else has a lodge 50 or 100 kilometers, it's an eco lodge. These are all standalone lodges. They can't deliver that much. But if you have the entire area developed as a sustainable model, then it will affect even those people who are not directly into tourism, who are indirectly connected with that area, and they are aiding tourism and they are benefiting from tourism. So it is very important for India to start looking at that. Australia is already doing it. There is a very big outfit called Green Destinations that's working in different parts of the world. So Green Destinations is marking out this territory where the governments or the individuals, or not the individuals, but the communities are coming together and saying, hey, we want to be managed. We want sustainable management of our area. So we need to talk about it. We can't say that one lodge in Kana or Pench is an eco lodge. We want to say entire Pench is ecotourism destination, not just one lodge or not just a few lodges. Let's say if there are 100 lodges and only about 12 are eco lodges, it doesn't say that. It needs to be, the ethos of the place has to come up as an ecotourism area. That's sustainable destination management. So the government needs to look at that, and the managers need to look at that, and then you and I need to look at that. We need to talk to our stakeholders in our destinations, how to convert the entire destination into a sustainable destination, ecotourism destination, and how to have it managed. So signage is very important, you know, small little things, you know, bird watchers. Why tiger conservation? Why did I say about tiger? I'm particularly, so it's not just about the tiger. Tiger I brought in because tiger has maximum amount of conservation fund coming in. It's got the maximum amount of revenue. It's got maximum amount of takers, and there's a huge engine that's being built up constantly to improve this part of tourism, tiger tourism. And tiger is a flagship species. So I say tiger. When I say tiger, what you can do is just pick up any great model of tiger tourism and plant it somewhere else and make minor tweaks, and you're good to go. Of course, there will be other things that will fall into place, dynamics of the local place, you know, topography, people, culture, landscape, all of that. But you got the framework from tiger tourism, which is why I said tiger tourism. Right? So it's not just about the tigers, it's about any green natural area which needs to be preserved. And as time will go by, not every place will, you know, it'll face the wrath of tourism or investments or land grab or XYZ, whatever, you know. So we need to be working, we need to be proactive when it comes to that. So tiger and Sundarbans, you know, the local village, and then there are my elephants. These are, so we have a conservation goal here. We want to protect all the Asian elephant corridors with the help of Wildlife Trust of India, actually, or help Wildlife Trust of India doing that. On Tuesday, at the same time, I've got a webinar with Vivek Menon. So don't miss that. You will, of course, get the information. So Vivek Menon is going to talk about everything about Asian elephant corridors. So that's the end of my presentation here, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I just want to I want people to if you all enjoyed it, can you just say why? And if you think that it was too much information and not required, just say N. So I'd know, how it was for you. Okay, you can do that. And I'm going to have Akanksha now speak. Akanksha, it's all yours. We can't hear you, Akanksha. No. No. Can you all hear Akanksha, or is it only me who's not being able to hear Akanksha? If you can hear Akanksha, say A, and if you can't hear Akanksha, then say N. Can't hear. Okay. So Akanksha, you can't. No problem. What you can do is you can log out and log back in. No problem with that. Oh wait. Okay, just go ahead and log in again. No problem. Yeah. So friends, thank you for being here. I'm really encouraged, and I'm really happy that a lot of you are here. And my attempt here is to keep bringing value to you as I go along. I'm a follower of Chanakya, and Chanakya very clearly states that if you've gone beyond your basic survival of food and shelter, then your dharma in this world is to deliver what you know as a pipeline to the world that you live in. So you need to continue to there. Okay, great. Akanksha, you back?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely. So it's all yours. Go ahead. Yeah.
A very good evening, everyone, and it's such a pleasure to be here as a part of this really active, interactive, discussion on tigers, communities, and ecotourism. And I think something which Mohit has done really well is introduce the concept of ecotourism and how important it is for everyone to actually work together. So, as Mohit mentioned earlier, my background is that I started my own wildlife company back in 2004, focusing on the Sundarbans. And it was all about working with the communities to establish a place where there is no fresh water, no electricity, nobody is there from a tourism background, and actually training them and getting them involved into tourism. So at any point, if you have any questions, please type them out and I will try and answer them as we go ahead in the discussion. My first place I'll be covering is the Sundarbans National Park. Now, Sundarbans, as you all know, or if you don't know, I would like to give a small introduction, is the world's largest mangrove forest with tiger habitat. And it generally has a mindset of, it's known for the man-eating tigers of Sundarbans, or honestly, they are not man-eaters because they don't enter the villages and hunt people down. It's just because the prey base is really low and man is an easy prey. And when he's bending down, they end up attacking it. So what the forest department has done over the years is they've made put up fences around the village side and reduce the man-animal conflict. And with that, I would like to just show a map so that you can understand where the Sundarbans is located. And this will, if you have any questions about the map, let me know as I'm going in detail over here. So if you can see on the extreme left-hand side, we have a smaller map which shows you Calcutta, where my arrow is pointing right now. And then that's the last point to travel is Godkhali. Now, it's very important to understand that to travel to Sundarbans, it is essential to travel by road It's a distance of 125 kilometers from Calcutta. Takes you approximately 2.5 hours in a small vehicle. In a bigger vehicle, it takes you 3.5 hours. And then to get to any lodge, and especially our lodge as well, you will have to hire a local boat. So that journey, after of course unboarding, boarding the boat, that takes you approximately 15 minutes. And then coming down the channel, coming to our island in Dayapur, it takes you another hour and 45 minutes. So even for like when you compare to the other national parks, which is like Kana, Bandhavgarh, Ranthambore, Jim Corbett, the whole tiger safari experience in Sundarbans is completely unique. Your complete safari is done by local boats, and this is one way we feel that we can encourage local employment, and that's something which we started it in back in 2004. So you can see these small highlights here. These are the various watchtowers. And generally, it's recommended that you spend 2 nights, 3 days to 3 nights, 4 days at the park to completely experience the local culture and to get a chance to see the different width of the creeks, understand what are smaller creeks, what are canals, and how they are affected by high tide and low tide. And something very interesting about the Sundarbans again is that it's the only forest in the world which actually goes underwater twice a day. So what I mean by twice a day, because of the high tide effect, every 5.5 hours you have low tide and you have a high tide. It's a World Heritage Site. It's the only place in the world to come and see the elusive swamp tigers. It's the world's largest tidal delta. And most uniquely, it is also the only place in the world where you can see 7 varieties of kingfishers. Now, today, when we are talking about Sundarbans, why I'm highlighting this is because generally people have a mindset that we want to go to Sundarbans and see the tiger. Unfortunately, like the other parks in India, which are landlocked, Sundarbans is waterlogged. And because of the density and the thick mangrove vegetation, even if the tiger is like 2 feet inside the park, within the camouflaging uh, hital forest or the mangrove sundari trees, you may miss the sight. But today, like Mohit mentioned, someone who really contributes to the whole thing is the local populace, the locals who have a very sharp eye, who have lived there all their lives, and they're trained to spot. So something which has happened over the years is, I remember going back in 2004, we had approximately 10 forest guides only. And with time, as we were able to encourage people to travel to the Sundarbans, which had a very big mind block that the tiger will eat you up, you will get bitten by malaria, mosquitoes, and so on. Unfortunately, I would like to be very clear on this. The city has more mosquitoes than the parks because they have continuous flowing water. The locals here are completely dependent on rainwater harvesting. There's no electricity on the islands, but and they're and the main profession earlier was that they were honey collectors and fishermen. So they have a very well trained eye. And today I can proudly say that we have more than 75 people in the forest department who are working as field guides and who are not working as fishermen or doing prawn farming and actually helping and contributing towards the conservation of bird life, animal life, and are now protectors of the forest. In this image here, if you notice on the top left corner, we are showing the ruddy kingfisher, which is only found in Bangladesh and in the Indian Sundarbans. Unlike other parks, which are shut during the monsoon months, Sundarban remains open and is one of the best times to come and see the ruddy kingfishers. We have the black-capped, we have the collared. The brown king-winged is sometimes confused with the ruddy, but is very easily sighted. We have the white-throated, the common, and the pied kingfishers. Other than this, this area has got the different cats. We have the jungle cat, leopard cat, and fishing cat, which are very easily sighted. There are sightings of golden jackal, but then all this is possible to sight because the locals have stopped poaching and they have again contributed to conserving the Sundarbans because they are actually benefiting it from it. How are they benefiting from it? So we at Sundarban Tiger Camp have initially, as I was mentioning before, they were honey collectors, they were fishermen. Quite a few of them were poachers as well. So we provided an alternate employment to them. I personally had gone down and I trained them for hospitality, the basics that, how do you serve tea? How do you do housekeeping? There was a big taboo that if a woman who became a widow was had to go and live in a widow's village. We got rid of that mind block over the years by telling them that it's a situation which happens and depends on a factor of luck. And because most of the fishermen at that time were going illegally in the park, that's why they were being caught. If you notice and look at the statistics, man-animal conflict over the years have reduced, and the quality of life of the local people has become much better, considering that even today this community is living uh, at a situation where 100 years back, because they're still cooking with hay, as you can see on the left hand side picture. They make something called liquor cha, which we make our guests try during the village interactions so that they can earn some money. And what we do specifically during that time is we choose a different village house for every visit, so that every house in the village area gets an opportunity to earn something from our tourists. Of course, during COVID, we're not doing these interactions because of um, it's just a visual interaction where you can see how the houses are. It's not a very close knit one, but other than that, once we have the vaccination out, you will be going into the houses, sitting with them, talking to them, and experiencing how they lead their lives. I hope everybody can hear me and it's clear. On the right hand side, you can see an image of the local woman trying to make hadia or liquor, country liquor, and you can actually go and try that. Here we do something very special with the fishermen who have not got involved with tourism, is a honey collection tour, where you go on a bigger boat, and during the month of April and May, you go into the park and you can see how they're collecting honey. Why are they wearing the mask on their back? And something very interesting with Sundarbans is it's not only Bengalis. There are Adivasis who were displaced during the 1970 India-Bangladesh partition. There are Bangladeshi Sundarban locals. You have different tribals who have gone and started living here. So we have developed different kind of experiences which you can cover over a period of 2 night 3 days or 3 night 4 days. And these interactions have actually helped these local communities in retaining the culture and not creating a concept of brain drain and moving to the cities. So when you come to Sundarbans, there's another challenge which a lot of people face, which is where do you go and stay? Unfortunately, what has happened over the years is that uh, people just like to go for cheap. When I say cheap, it's like less money. It's very important to understand Sundarban is not like a big city. It has no electricity, as I mentioned, but it has no fresh water. And of course, you want to give the right salary to your local people so that they can actually run their houses and they don't go into begging. So that's something which is very unique, which you'll see in Sundarbans. And that's where we came up with the concept of building an eco resort called Sundarban Tiger Camp. And the whole concept behind this was that we would use most of the space around the property, which is approximately 20 acres, for developing water bodies for rainwater harvesting, and also constructing rooms which are naturally distanced, and planting a lot of local and endemic trees and a lot of fruit trees to ensure that the bird life prospers, and also that you have enough greenery to do sighting within the property itself. And that's something which you can see here in the next picture of the kind of accommodation that we are providing. Now, this whole property is run on biofuel. And if you can notice, the furniture is also made by the locals. We've got paintings done by the local artists who were skilled. And this has actually encouraged the local people to retain painting, learning their craft, retaining and cane making, making chatais. They're excellent craftsmen in making batik. Sundarban has makes Sundarban honeys, which is known as swamp honey or mangrove honey. If you go to America and if you try to buy it, it's one of the most expensive honeys, and it's actually got a lot of benefits for it, from curing cancer to helping in vitality, improving your health. So that's a lot that's available in Sundarbans. So all this is only possible, the growth or development of the region is only when you work in partnership with the locals and with the forest department. So what we were able to do with the forest department, of course, was that we were able to open fresh routes for locals to and tourists to go and explore. Alongside, we train the local villagers to understand that when the tourists are coming in, they are going to be interacting with you. Of course, we also have to understand that this is a region which was only familiar with speaking in the Bengali language. And they've really worked hard to learn the Hindi, and we've got these special classes done for English. So they're able to speak to you in the language and interact with you. So with time, they have been able to become confident. And today, if you notice here in the previous slide, this man is an Israeli tourist. He was here. He's interacting with this local guy about how he was doing farming, how he was on the other months doing fishing, understanding his basic life. Whereas something else which is also very important is that we feel that the tourist should understand the local place and also understand what he has to do when he's visiting the destination. So for this effort, what we did was we started sending out handouts and educating our guests that please don't only run after the tiger. Also, please focus on, if you have a termite hill or if you have borers, why are they important to the ecosystem? Because it's also important to understand that every single insects, if there are insects, there are going to be birds. If there are birds, there are going to be birds of prey. If there are going to be birds of prey, you're going to have fish. You're going to have a very prospering aqua life. You will have deers. These birds and butterflies help in germination and help in the health of the forest. And that's the focus that we work on working with our ecotourists, right? And also about the education level of the children. It's very important to educate that you are going to have certain wildlife around your area. It's also important to understand that these children are the next gen, and you have to tell them about conservation. So if you notice the two pictures here, we are giving an education program along with our guests where you can actually go and talk to these children. You can talk about your experiences on the city life, tell them how important it is to maintain the ecosystem of the forest and not encourage poaching. So I hope I'm clear and if everybody can hear me. If you see, I'm just going to continue because we do have limited time. On the left, we have Harida, who started working with us back in 2004, and he was a fisherman. Today, he knows how to read and write in English. He manages our excise and he can speak English. And on the right, we have Niranjan Raptan, who was one of the best poachers in Sundarbans, who's actually become a guide, and he does insurances and trains the younger guys about conservation. He's known as the Bogli of Sundarbans. He's featured in Condé Nast, Travel and Leisure, and this is what we're talking about. Ensuring that people are trickling down this effect. That they are teaching the next generation, and I'm proud to say that the locals in Sundarbans are doing that. And if tourists are going to support it, like in this image here, we do get a lot of international guests and domestic guests who want to continue educating the younger generations about the use of no plastic. Also, it's important to know that plastic is not only, like Mohit mentioned before, in straws. It's also meant there in cold drinks. So we stopped serving cold drinks in plastic bottles. We have glass bottles that we're using there. There are Lay's chips. There are these snacks that are available. We should encourage our guests to go and have fresh local produce, which also helps the local economy, because then as a hotel and a resort, as a traveler, you're procuring that directly from them. Like we procure all our fresh crab meat and so on. So the locals are earning from tourism, and then they feel that yes, we need to support the community. It's a give and take relationship in the end of the day. So that's where I think we are being very successful. Here is some of the interactions that we're doing, which are actually helping, and I can proudly say again has helped in the development of Sundarban from a place which was considered to be, not for tourism, into one of the best places to go and experience authentic local culture. It's not very developed. It's still very basic. It's still a place which is 100 years back, and you will actually find the original way of life, how these people lived 100 years back, still being displayed there. On the topmost corner, we have a foreigner interacting with the locals. She went to play football with them. The village school in the middle, which is happening in the heart for younger classes. Where my image is coming, there's a small boat, which is a dinghy boat ride, where you go with a bowl singer. So this helps retain the bowl culture, and you do a sunset cruise. There's a local Toto boat ride experience which has come. So I guess you're allowed to ride a small distance in that, which is quite comparatively safe. And then we take our guests in that to explore the different parks and different villages and different islands within Sundarbans. Of course, as you know, Sundarbans is a network of different islands. You can see the house in the middle. Something very interesting to know here is the houses in Sundarbans are made like a maze. They have two kitchens, one to be used during the summer months, one to be used during the winter months, and every house has a pukur. And then in the evenings, we do an interaction with tiger attack victims or people who are hunters, so that you can understand their way of life and how they are actually sustaining themselves and contributing to the village life and to the forest. Um, at the lodge, like Mohit mentioned earlier, we are promoting the local culture of a couple of Adivasi tribes. Left, these are Rajbanshi tribes, and then there are other Adivasi tribes who are living there. So we call them for an evening dance interaction where you actually get to learn their dance while they're performing it as well. And this was a dinghy boat I mentioned earlier.
So, Akash, we got 9 minutes to go.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The next I would like to focus on is Pench. Pench, of course, is known as one of the most popular tiger destinations in central India. It's very easily accessible from Nagpur. It's just an hour and a half now because of the national highway. And what's very unique about this park is that you have the safaris, of course, within the core zone. But going to Pench and staying in the Madhya Pradesh side, you can access the Maharashtra side and the Madhya Pradesh side. And you can also do activities like pottery and do village walks and village experiences. So talking about 4x4 safaris, we still promote the use of small gypsies because they're very easy to maneuver. And I think the Pench is an all-year destination. Even in the monsoon months now, you have the buffer zone open where you can actually go and sight a lot of wildlife. Maybe not the tiger inside the park, but you have better chances of spotting them outside the park now because the population is really increasing. And this is a picture in the middle, which I've personally clicked at Khursapar. And on the left, you can see the picture of the leopard, which was just seen on the road in Turia. And you can see a lot of sloth bear sightings on the village side. Again, a place known for birding, fantastic for migratory bird sightings. You can come anytime during post the monsoon months for birding. I would recommend coming from late October to early March. And something exciting about Pench is you can actually do good birding outside the park as well in near Koka Dam. It's one of the only parks as well where you have an experience of doing a night safari. Now, this is done in a place which is known as Khursapar, and there you have this place called night patrolling. And here you can go for a safari from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and it's only done with a torch in your hand. In the months of monsoons, when you have mahua growing, and mahua is a very important product which the locals consider, they all go out for early morning collection. It is used for making mahua oil, it is used for making mahua halwa, it's making for use for using mahua liquor. Mahua is also the state tree of Madhya Pradesh. So you can be a part of this early morning Mahua collection experience. You can see how they're making a liquor out of it. You can be a part of an experience of a potter's village, which is at Pachthar, where you go and you have these 100 potters family living there. You can do something as basic as learning about how they are doing pottery, or you can go to the farm and collect mud with them and actually process the mud, which is a 3-day intensive activity. Or you can go and interact with the local tribes. You have Goan tribes living in this area, and I think it really helps them maintain the house. Seeing a picture which Mohit had put earlier but the houses are painted blue and white. It's actually to keep the houses cool during the summer months, and also to identify uh, that no flies come into the houses. So it's a very unique culture which you can come and contribute and see. Now, when we talk about the resort here, we have a beautiful resort here called the Riverwood Forest Retreat Bench. All the staff here live within the vicinity, and again, they have been trained under the Hunar Se Rozgar program. And what we have done here is we believe in using solar power wherever possible. We do solar water heaters. We believe in using having a lot of natural light come into the rooms. So if you look at the room sizes, they're really big. You have your own private gardens where you can actually sleep under the stars at night. You can see that all local chicks are all made locally. Again, here we have the local paintings, and we're promoting local art, and we are also promoting the use and sightings of natural bird life. So depending on what you're looking for, Bench is one of, I think, again, another 365-day destination, and definitely one where you should go and experience. The cuisine of Madhya Pradesh is again very interesting because it's uh, it's got a mix of culture from Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh. You have a little bit of influence of Rajasthan here as well, and that's what we try to showcase. And all the local produce is brought from the villagers. So what we've seen here as well is that the local populace have again become conservationists, and the number of poachings happening in the area has reduced tremendously. And it's always good to come and promote the local culture and the local food, because then what happens is you actually get the complete essence of the destination. Again, something which is a great USP with our location here is that you can actually do stargazing because we are not close to any other resort. We're a standalone in this region. We do cycling tours to different kind of villages. We do a cycling tour to the Rukhar forest area, which takes you through the Mowgli's Park, and you can see a lot of bird life. You can see a lot of butterflies in this region, and the watchtower is especially unique because you can see the sunset, the sunrise. And we have this non-perennial river flowing next to our property where we do get a lot of bird life and wildlife, such as leopards. We have our tiger living in our area. So it's actually great to see this. And all these tours are actually led by the locals who live in the villages around our resort, especially within 10 kilometers. So they are the experts in this destination. Now, coming last to Duas. Duas is a very fascinating area. It's in North Bengal, and it's known as Duas because it is the gateway to Bhutan and Assam. And this is one area where you have five national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. You have the Mahananda Wildlife Sanctuary, you have Gurumara National Park, Chapramari Forest, you have Neora Valley National Park, which is known for tiger sightings recently. You have the Baksa Tiger Reserve, and of course, Jaldapara. And what's again interesting is from Siliguri to reach Gurumara, it takes you 2.5 hours to 3 hours. You can spend 2 nights, 3 days here uh, or more. Of course, if you want to go around the whole region, experience tea gardens, or use it for a night spent before doing an itinerary up to Bhutan, because you can do an overland journey. It takes you approximately 2 hours from Duas to go to Phunchling, or you can continue into Guwahati. And again, that's one more itinerary which you can plan, because road journeys are something which are very exciting and very upcoming. Uh, Again, another unique thing, going back to the map here, is that this is also a place with a lot of culture and a great mix. You have Bhutanese, you have Nepalese, you have Bangladeshis, you have Gorkhas, you have Rajvanshi tribes. You have all these tribes living within 100 square kilometers of each other. So if you want to come and explore their culture, we can actually do an interactive session where you can actually go to the local villages, a complete authentic Bhutia village, and see how they make rice liquor, rice wine, how do they shopping, how they pray to Buddhist gods. And what we have noticed over the years is this again has reduced the poaching in the region and also reduced man-animal conflict, because again people are being very conscious about the elephant corridor which passes through this area. So this elephant corridor is the same which connects Jharkhand, West Bengal into Assam and Bhutan. And you see herds of elephants, which are approximately at times during harvest season, especially, which range from 150 to 200 at times. But an average size of a herd, which you can easily see during non-harvest period, is 15 to 22 alone as well. We have the Indian gaur, which are massive in size in this region and can be easily sighted on the road, along with leopards in the tea gardens, and of course the one-horned rhinoceros, which people generally think are only available in Chitwan and in Assam, but we of course also have them here in Duars. Again, great for
So,
birding. I think Mohit will talk
you,
more about that later in his other thing. I will not go more details. Yes, Mohit. Just another minute.
yeah, no, no, I'm saying you're running out of time now.
Yeah, just another minute and I will just finish it up. It's also great for jeep safaris because you can explore how the lower Himalaya or the Terai region of this area gives you a safari experience of seeing different kind of birds. But most importantly, it's the culture. Like here on the middle top, we have a Toto tribe who were earlier headhunters, and now they have become they've started cooking recently for the last 10-15 years. On the left, you have a typical Bengali woman who has been working here in a British tea garden. We have the CTC tea found in this region, which is a cut, tear, curl method. And this is not the Darjeeling tea. This is a regular tea which we drink. This area grows a lot of fruits because of the abundance of water and the number of channels of rivers we have. Uh, Great worshippers of Shiva in this region, also because of the elephant god found here. Very picturesque place. You have the hill station, and it's a very interactive place where you can actually go into the tea garden and experience how to do the plucking, tea tasting, and see the tea processing. So when we are supporting all these experiences, it again helps in the development of the region in growing as sustainably as possible. Here we have a small resort which is only 12 rooms. It's called the Riverwood Forest Retreat Duars, where we have 626 double-bedded room. And what is unique about our property is you can see the K2 peak on a clear morning sky. Again, focusing on, we have our own migratory bird pond where you can see a lot of migratory and endemic birds. We have our own resident Indian rock python. We've had the leopard come and give birth on the small island on the left many times. And that's it. If you have any questions, very happy to take them in the chat box. Thank you so much, Mohit.
Thank you, Akanksha. This was absolutely brilliant. Thank you for transporting us into these areas. What are we doing here at home? I don't know. Anyway, so this was absolutely wonderful. And thank you for sharing this. It's important for people to understand that this is the beginning. This is the journey of ecotourism. We have lots of things which we need to do as we go along in ecotourism. So get down to understand the science of either becoming ecotourist, or if you're from the trade, then you need to understand the science of ecotourism. And this is how the future is going to be. So what I've done is I've shared two documents here. One is some sort of discount coupons that Akanksha wants to give you, and one is another document which is like a cheat sheet of some of her tours that we do here, with her. And I've gone and stayed at all the places, and they're absolutely magical. So I invite you to come and stay with them. Anyway, this entire thing is all about understanding ecotourism, understanding that ecotourism is not just because you're in a green area or you do something, a few things that out of your thing of helping environment. Great, no doubt. You have to think about the communities. How are they going to get your help, and what are you going to take from there? So, like I said, make your ecologists, make your operations absolutely spiritual in nature, inclusive in nature, and then you've won the game. Yeah, that's my take on this. So if you've got any questions, friends, do put them in the chat, and Akanksha or I will be able to help you. And if you're done with it, then enjoy your dinner. It's 8:30 for us. And tell us if you like the sessions, if you have any feedback for us. We're very happy. Fareen, can you put the link of our community link so that everybody can sort of become part of the community if they like, Facebook community or WhatsApp community? Thank you, Narendraji. Thank you very much. I'm glad to write that. Thank you, Praveen. So a lot of your friends are here, Akanksha. You might want to say thank you to them.
So I'm doing that. Thank you so much. There's quite a lot of people. Such a pleasure to have a great attendance. Like I can see a lot of people on the list, and it's wow. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in such short notice and giving Mohat and me a chance and opportunity to actually explain what ecotourism is. It's especially important in today's world when there's a lot of greenwashing happening. It's important to understand how important it is to also tell where we travel. If somebody is not practicing it, giving your 2 bits doesn't hurt.
Absolutely. So on Tuesday, friends, there's going to be another webinar with Vivek Menon, and we're going to deep dive into the status of Asian elephants and understand some interesting things. And also, I want you to show your support and love to Wildlife Trust of India, because they've been working day in, day out to help Asian elephant corridors. And if you've got people who are interested in elephants, bring them along. I'll be sharing the link with you in a day or so. And I want to see all of you back here on Tuesday evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.